We start with cities, culture, and effect of technology. I have picked up three cities: San Francisco, Chicago, and Dubai. And there are reasons for that. Now, the paper is primarily intended as an introduction to the young students the idea of city. It's not intended as any research or historical critique for scholarly admissions, but a mere talk on the project, on the topic. Presented as a pictorial roller coaster ride are three well-known cities that have stood out in terms of their evolution and endowed with interesting facets that have been selected, namely San Francisco, Chicago, and Dubai. The lecture is divided as follows: city, defining what a city is; culture, defining what culture is; and technology, defining what technology is and what it does to the city. Now let's start looking at what constitutes a city. I'm sure you may have come across in your books that you've studied some of these drawings, right? You'll see, Chandigarh here, Villa Redvi, and this is Renaissance. This is Lithium's Delhi. This is Broadacre, and that's the Garden City. Okay, so if you have not come across them, you will come across these. Now, if humankind can be said to have a single greatest creation, it would be the archetype representing the most eloquent expression of our species' ingenuity, beliefs and ideals, the city. Let me tell you that before great inventions took place, it was the interaction between human beings that led to this. It was the human beings that came together and started from small villages, agrarian or whatever you like to say, small get-togethers, social interactions through which they developed into towns and so on and so forth. To me, it's much more than an expression. It's an evolving socio-economic tool that feeds on technology, arts, communication, cognition. Unique to the city is the urban experience. The kind of urban experience that you get in a day is remarkable, what has been achieved. Neolithic period, 9000 to 3000 BC, witnessed the coming together of small fixed settlements. First recognizable cities begin to emerge around 3500 BC. In fact, Jane Jacobs, now remember this name, a pioneering work on urban aspects on city planning, Jane Jacobs. The city preceded the agrarian society. It's a fact she researched into, but it was not proved, but it is there. In its further development, city is relatively permanent and highly organized collection of urban communities that are brought together by legal conventional distinctions and are of greater in size than a town or a village. Here I assume that because of your exposure and because of the subject that you've done, you would know the difference between village, town and an urban settlement and eventually a city. The idea of urban community and its culture is urbanism, is central to any city. In another way, a type of community or sets of community. A city has relatively permanent concentration of population with its diverse habits, social space, activities occupying a site that separates it from other settlements or other cities. But that definition is small, or exploitation is small. It cannot just merely be that. There are other aspects which would differentiate a Bombayite, a Delhiite, a Calcuttan, or a Chennaiyan, or form the other city which they enact with. Similarly, you would say, okay, an Indian. So an Indian would be comprising of a Delhiite, Bombayite, etc., etc. So American, so on and so forth. So there is a brand kind of a thing labeled onto you that you are an Indian and you are from Delhi, so you are a Delhiite. Whether when you go down to talk to Delhiite, they say, okay, are you from South Delhi, East Delhi, Patel Nagar, or whatever. So there are the semi-pockets of hierarchical pockets of urban cultural centers. Now, you will have now come across, I will explain to you fundamentally what the city is made up of. Okay. You heard of ATCG, right? Have you heard of ATCG? Okay. So have you heard of DNA? There is much talked about word DNA, right? Have you heard or no? No? Okay. DNA is fundamental to your own human body, and it comprises of four elements A, T, C, G. Similarly, what elements make up the DNA of a city? Alright, now let me just explain to you. There are basically only three elements that make up a city, or three chemicals that make up a city. Okay. One is habitation. Alright. Habitation can be of any type. It can be a house, it can be a church, an office, a hospital, railroad station, anything you name, any structure that you see that is built for doing a purpose for which a human being goes there, can stay there, is protected from climate, etc. Right? That is one. Second thing is movement. If you see the movement, that if I have to get from X place, from my house to the market, I need space to move. The market is not in my house. If I have to go to a hospital, or if I have to go to an airport, I have to move, and I have to have dedicated space for that movement. Forget about the dedicated discipline, but the movement. So the second thing is the space for movement. Alright, two things we've got. One is habitation, the other is space for movement. Now what is the third thing? The third thing is very important because initially it started from that concept itself, because it isolated various types of habitations. The third, which I say, is space in between the two. Alright, the space in between the two, you can see here, or in this illustration, in this photograph, that you will see the vehicular movement, you will see the habitation of various types, but you see a space which is isolated, where people do not move, or the vehicles cannot move, and this space is called what is named as space in between. Okay, that's all. That's all what the cities are. Forget about the traffic which you see, but basically the traffic is on a space called movement space. Habitation, offices where I see habitation, where I sit, or when I go back to home, I sleep or do all activities, etc. Then there is a space which is left over, which is either can be setbacks or what you would call gardens or etc. within the compounds. Now it is this sole interaction of the space in between which had an impact on the 20th century or science planning, modern planning. If you see if you see the plans out here, and you see the thing, that the buildings are now separated, while in this one, the blocks of buildings together. And in fact, in some of these earlier medieval cities, you would have just the buildings together, without any urban other things tearing it to bits. Garden cities change a viewpoint that we must have a garden, and Frank Lloyd Wright went to the extreme of having a 1 acre plot for each farm unit. But that's the way of looking at it, and there's no critique on that. Now, the issue is that city thereby now is dependent on the third element, and thereby keeps evolving or perishing. Now culture. Now have you heard a word called culture? It comes from, the last speaker was talking about intangible stuff and economics, and you will see how important role of economics is. and tangibility and intangibility? Can we see it? Can we not do things about it? Now, culture, culture shock, culture vulture, culture globalization, you're familiar with these words. But it can be stated possibly as a collective reflection on a common